So Mississippi State finished 7-6 last year. They had some solid wins. Obviously, they won at A&M, at Auburn. They won a game against Kentucky at home. On the flip side, towards the end of the season, some disappointment there. They also, they lost the Egg Bowl. They got obliterated by Texas Tech in the bowl game. Had the disappointing loss at the beginning to Memphis. What's the mood of the fan base going into the season right now?
Cautiously optimistic. I mean, seriously, you still have a portion, and it's a small portion of the Mississippi State fan base that says, hey, look, Mike's got to run the ball more. And I get it. I understand that. But, I mean, you hired Mike Leach. You knew what he was going to do. You knew that he was coming in to throw the ball. I think cautiously optimistic. I think the fan base would like to see more consistent football. One of the things they were not last year is consistent. I mean, they literally almost lost to Louisiana Tech last year, week 1. They had to come back to win that. They lost a game at Memphis. They had a close loss against LSU. So the bowl game against Louisville, Texas Tech was absolutely terrible. So you go on the road, though, and you come back at Auburn. You go on the road, Texas A&M, and you play well. Egg Bowl, you don't really play well. So a lot of inconsistent football, and let's not leave out the Arkansas game where, you miss 3 kicks, you lose a game in Fayetteville, and then Mike Leach comes back and openly solicits for tryouts on campus for a kicker. So, I think they just want to see more consistent football. And I think that literally is going to be the theme this year is how consistent can this team be? Because it is year 3 of Mike Leach. Will Rogers is the starting quarterback. He's not going to be nervous or scared in any stadium that he steps in. They've got, the best receiving core that they've had in a long time, probably dates back to Dan Mullen, 2014-15, Dak Prescott. They've got players on defense. They're not Alabama players on defense or Georgia, but it's a solid defense. So consistency for me is going to be, and I think a lot of people, what they're looking for out of this team this year.
So, okay, question about that, because I didn't even realize until you went through it. I forgot about that Louisiana Tech game. I mean, what a fucking nightmare. I mean, great comeback. It's like the largest comeback in program history. But, that's how you kick off the entire season. It kind of probably was a little bit of an omen, I guess, for the rest of the year. The 7-6 season, you still have, like you said, wins against Kentucky, a win against Texas A&M on the road, by the way, which is tough to do for some teams. My question is, what is the expectation, big picture wise, right, for Mike Leach? And what is, because I don't think when he was hired, he's never been a guy that's played for a natty or necessarily won. He's won big games, but what is acceptable for the fan base in terms of his success?
For a program like Mississippi State, and I can say this because, obviously we cover the SEC, but I went to Mississippi State. So, I was there 1996 through 2000, was there through the Jackie Sherrill era. The one time State ever won the SEC West, I was actually there. So, I can always hang your hat on that. But, for State, it's know who you are. And, you don't want to be a bottom feeder, but, you got to be realistic with it. State is not going to compete with Alabama year in and year out, especially with Nick Saban doing what he's doing. You could possibly find yourself in that second spot in the SEC West if everything goes well. So yeah. I think for State fans, if you can live in a 7-8 win range, play some good football, and then of course, you need to beat your rival. Leach is 0-2 against Kiffin right now in the Egg Bowl. I think most fans would be satisfied with that. Most people were satisfied with Dan Mullen, and I would say most everybody was until the latter part of his tenure at Mississippi State, and that was typically a 7-win, 8-win. They did get to an Orange Bowl. They did get to number 1 once, first time in program history. So I think if Mississippi State fans could see a 7-8 win, 9-win team, somewhere in that range each year, and then, have an opportunity where you get kind of a, say a decade type quarterback like Leach saw at Texas Tech. And then once we saw it or twice at Washington State, and you get to 10 or 11 wins and you actually in the conversation in November, once in a blue moon, I think people would live, be happy with that.
This is the most fucking reasonable answer ever. I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at the power rankings for FPI, they have Mississippi State as a top 25 team, but their projected record is either, depending on if you want to round up or round down, 7-5, 6-6. Their number in Vegas, I believe, is 6.5.
That's correct.
So while they're projected to be a top team in the country, they've got the number 2, at least according to Phil Steele, the number 2 hardest schedule in the country. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that.
Yeah, Mike Leach at Mississippi State, this is the most talented team recruiting-wise, if you go by a 3-year metric or a 4-year metric, than he's ever had anywhere he's coached. More so at Texas Tech, more so at Washington State. The problem is everybody else in the SEC West is elite recruiters. I mean, from Alabama, Texas A&M, they're in the top 3. You look at LSU, they're in the top 10. Auburn lives in the top 15. Arkansas, Ole Miss. I mean, so he's with the most talented team that he's ever had, but it just so happens that he's played in the hardest division that he's ever had. So for Mississippi State, there's not a lot of room for error. He's got to have elite quarterback play, and that can help win you a game or two on Saturday that you shouldn't. But then you've got to play error-free football, and you got to be consistent, because Mississippi State's going to find themselves in 3 or 4 one-possession ball games. You're going to look up on a Saturday, and State and Arkansas and Starkville's going to be down, inside 10 minutes, and it's going to be a one-possession game. State and Auburn, likely State and Ole Miss, State and Kentucky. So can they win those one-possession ball games? And Mike Leach typically, more years than not, will drop a game that he shouldn't. Last year did it at Memphis. You can go back and look through his schedule at Texas Tech. They did the same thing at Washington State. I believe they lost a ball game one year to Eastern Washington or someone to that effect early.
The best directional Washington school, though.
Yeah, you can't drop week 1 against Memphis, and you can't lose to Arizona on the road out in the desert in week 2. He's got to pick both those up. So I think, though, to kind of circle back, the talent is really good for Mike Leach at Mississippi State. It just so happens that he plays in an elitist, I guess we could say, division in football.
Yeah. I tell you what, you have about like close possession games and wins. I would take a 25 point, not a loss because you guys came back, but like just deficit in the first half and just rip Auburn's heart out every year. I wish you guys would do that, just for the next decade or so, because that was fantastic. And on the road too. So going into this year, we are going into last year at the receiver position. You had to replace how am I forgetting his name? Number 8. How am I forgetting the running back's name?
Oh, Kylan Hill.
Yeah, Kylan Hill. So you had to replace him. You had a lot coming out in the spring game about Wally at receiver. He kind of goes down with an injury. I don't think he underperformed necessarily last year, but he just wasn't as consistent as I kind of thought. Is he going to take the next step, or who's a guy on that offense that's going to be a household name besides Will Rogers?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Jaden Wally's a guy that's going to take the next step. He was battling some injuries last year, and there was some points and times where he just was not 100%. Look for him to be completely 100% this year, and to definitely be a factor. You look at a couple other guys on that roster. There's a transfer, and the names escape me because I don't have the roster in front of me, so I do apologize. I'm winging this. There we go. Got a transfer from Northwestern, transfer from Georgia that's going to be there. And then there's 2 or 3 other guys that have seen significant time in that wide receiver room. So, and you got to look at the 2 backs, Jaquavius Marks being one.
Yeah.
He's a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. So, I mean, you're looking at a couple running backs that can run and move and wiggle, and they can catch it out of the backfield. We know where Mike Leach's quarterbacks like to check down. And then you look at a guy like the 2 transfers, and then you bring back Jaden Wally. There's some guys that can actually absolutely play on this wide receiver unit. They're going to probably go 8-9 deep in that unit this year.
Love that.
Justin Robinson from UGA, Jordan Mosley from Northwestern. I don't blame you, by the way, for not knowing this. I've been a diehard of my alum for years, my alma mater, I should say. And I can't keep up with the transfer portal and all this kind of the roster movement is insane these days. So it's it's very hard. I'll be watching practice clips and I'll be like, I don't know who half these guys are right now just based on their numbers. So, hey, we can't fault you for it.
Okay. This will be I'm sorry to be just up on you. This will be the deepest wide receiver room he's had. And there are different body types. There's some guys that are tall, longer, rangier that can get down the field. And then there's some guys that will play in the slot and move around. So it should be his best group since he's been there.
I tell you what, that's a big thing right there that we haven't discussed enough or even seen enough from Leach, because I feel like this is brought up almost ad nauseum still, because no one has heard from KJ Costello since September of 2020. He just went missing. I'm assuming the Clintons did something, but we're not going to get into that tonight. There's been good pass catchers, there's been good receivers, but there hasn't really been from even a body type, standpoint, a lot of difference and disparity between those receivers. It seems like a lot of slack guys, to be honest. How's the defense going to be this year? I've heard one take consistently from Georgia fans. I've heard a lot of takes from Georgia fans. The only one I've cared to listen to is that they are a little bit wary and concerned about that trip to Starkville, because they don't make a lot of trips to the SEC West. And I guess 2020, that was JT Daniels' first start. They have a very close game in Athens. Is there any chance that they have a game where they can knock off a team like Georgia, a team like Bama, or one of the elite teams like that?
I don't think that they have a shot to knock Bama off. To answer that question first, I mean, Bama, I saw something that I think it was Salih on CBS Sports put out, or others maybe as well, as Saban said, hey, look, Bama was in a rebuild year last year. For Bama, for him to say that about last year playing in the national championship game, that spells doom for everybody else. So let's just take Bama off the table. And plus, Mississippi State has not fared well against Alabama. You can go all the way back almost to the beginning of the Nick Saban era. Defensively, though, it should be a really good group. And what's really good mean? Middle of the pack of the SEC. A nice staff, really good staff, good defensive coordinator. They're going to have some guys that can play up front. Now, they're not as deep as Texas A&M or Alabama or Georgia, but they've got some guys that can play. Second level, they got linebackers that can run. The big question for them is the secondary, a unit that gave up they were last in the SEC at, giving up 40 or more yard passes last year. I think they gave up 10 or 11 last year. It was a stupid number. That secondary is going to be rebuilt. They brought in a lot of transfers, got a transfer from Alabama, transfer from West Virginia, transfer from Michigan. And I believe there was another one in there as well. So that secondary is going to be totally rebuilt. They did it through the transfer portal. So the unit will be salty. The unit will be good, good enough on most days. And, back to your question about a team like Georgia. Yeah, Starkville's a tough place to play. I mean, it's just about anywhere in the league is a tough place to play except for Vanderbilt and maybe Missouri, maybe. But, I mean, they've done a great job of that atmosphere there. And, if Georgia comes in and if State's healthy, if Georgia's offense is sputtering and, Will Rogers is slinging it around, around the yard, so to speak, yeah, I think they could possibly knock off a team like Georgia late in the season. Conversely, I mean, you don't want to turn around and lose a game, against, a team like Arizona either. So, again, consistency is going to be the theme, but the defense should keep them in most games this year.
Just fucking bring back Jolie Dunn and just make my life, please.
Jolie, absolutely. Love Jolie Dunn.
I was going to say that if there's one thing that I know Chris loves is salty unit.
That's good. That's good. Honestly, we're about out of time here. So that's a perfect. Jake,
right.
Before we let you go, do you have another question?
Well, I was just going to do over/under pick on the win total of 6.5.
Yeah, and that's I was going to say that too. Same thing.
Same.
But I also want to hear the other 10 bets you made, because now that I'm thinking about it, 10, that's a lot. That is a lot. You don't have to share all of them, but give us the good ones.
All right, so I know I took Mississippi State on the over at 6.5. Mm-hmm. I took SMU over their total at 6.5. I really like SMU's team, like the quarterback that they have. I think they've worked the transfer portal very well. Let's see. I took Auburn under the 5.5.
Oh God! I mean, I respect you for it, but I don't know.
Auburn under the 5.5. I took Tennessee over 8.5.
Okay. I hate everything.
Hey, what's your guys' take on Tennessee real quick? I know you got other things to do here.
No, you're fine. I think so. I thought about this on the last pod. They're the only team, and I've given shit to Arkansas fans about we just kind of expect the close losses are going to become wins, and the wins are just going to stay wins for because everyone's an optimist and going into the season. I think we've all kind of been just under the assumption they're going to be take a drastic next step in a positive direction, right? But I mean, now that I'm looking at it, they got to go to LSU. Georgia and Bama are still on that schedule. I love Hendon Hooker, but that defense has always been a problem for Heupel. So I'm just going to talk myself in circles for the next couple of months and hope they don't beat Bama. That's my only take.
So a couple others that I took, I've got the tickets across the room over there, but I know I took Utah over 8.5.
Yeah.
Got them one of the Pac-12 and making it to the playoff.
Wow.
Baylor over 8.5 as well. I like them in the Big 12. And then I took UTEP under 5 because, recency bias. They did win 7 last year, but they typically are a 4-win team. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of a couple others I put in there, but that's the ones that come right off the top of my head. I'll send you all the plays that I did.
Yeah, for sure. Final question. Okay. Better chance of happening this year. Mississippi State makes a New Year's Six Bowl, or Brandon Walker isn't a public asshole on Twitter for the rest of the year.
I know Brandon personally. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I would say probably Brandon Walker being an asshole all year.
That's fair. That's good. All right, Jake, we appreciate it, dude. Tell everyone where they can find you once again, and I'll look forward to coming on the radio show. Do not bring Tyler on there because he's won up me a bunch this year. So
got it. Hey, on Twitter at Jake Wim, and of course you can always stream the show on the zone1059.com podcast. Just all the podcast platforms. Just search the afternoon drive of the Jake Wimberly Show. And I will talk to both of you gentlemen soon. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. Appreciate it.
Man. Appreciate it.
Bye.